Welcome to Wake, a cold reading of James Joyce's Finnegans Wake, just to hear it out loud. Join Toby Malone and TJ Young, along with some special friends, as we puzzle our way through what we once thought was an unreadable book to produce a surprisingly listenable podcast. It is Thursday, May 23rd, 2024. It has been 7 days since we have started reading, with 29 pages complete of 628, meaning we have 599 pages left to go and are 4.62% of the way through Finnegans Wake. Welcome to episode 3 of Wake, an experiment that has no true meaning, purpose, or structure, but which fulfills a long-held bucket list item, reading James Joyce's Finnegans Wake out loud just once. I am your host, Toby Malone, and I'm once again joined by my extremely patient friend, TJ Young, who is really showing the mettle of our friendship by coming back once more. TJ, how are you?
I am great. I am a little hot in my office. The window's open, but there's no breeze. But we're going to make it through.
We will cool you down with the waves of Finnegans Wake coming at you. I got to say, when I do the intro, I was listening. I listened back the other day, and I feel bad. You've been front and center for every episode we've had so far. Yet my intro to the podcast only credits me as the host. We did talk in pre-production about how I would take the role of the host and you would be my producer, which I very much firmly appreciate and love having you here. And I also figured that there will be times when you're not here because you're very, very busy. But I just wanted to lay it out there that this is a team effort. This is not just the Toby show.
I appreciate it. And, just so we're clear, I feel like I'm running technical support on the back end, which is kind of what producers do. And I'm just happy to be here. We have already increased the reading that I have been able to do in the past 3 months.
Fantastic. And you can
threefold.
And this is really beneficial material for your tenure file. Put in there that you're a podcast producer now. I mean, you're also a producer. I will also say, I wanted to also bring up, I haven't brought it up yet, but TJ is the host of a wonderful other podcast, which is very different in tone to Wake.
Very different.
It is. We're going to censor the title because this is a clean podcast, but it is called Grown Men Watch Kids Stuff, a podcast where TJ and his good friend Jordan watch kids' movies and talk about it. And I've guested on there a couple of times, so I wanted to promote that because it is a great podcast. And there's some really fun episodes.
I appreciate it. And we are working on our schedule now that our brains are clear. And we're going to get you in on that Rocketeer episode here pretty soon.
Fantastic. I'm very much looking forward to it. I've guessed on a couple now. And Jordan, the co-host of GMWKS, is going to join us on Wake at some point as well. And he is a rootin' tootin' Texan who's all full of opinions and
spit and vigor as well.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So that's going to be very interesting. So looking forward to that. So we started our read last week, and we made our way all the way through chapter 1. We went through 2 episodes to get through chapter 1, and it feels pretty momentous to get our first Joycean break. We're hitting a chapter break that designated by Joyce himself, as opposed to the ones that the scholars have decided that's where the story changes. And so from our reading pace so far, we're generally covering around 15 pages in every 40 minutes or so, which I think is plenty. I don't think we want to go much longer than that. We could put together supercuts and do 6-hour episodes, but I mean, why would we do that? So, and so that's sometimes bridging a full chapter. There'll be times when we can, and sometimes some chapters are 70 pages long, so we'll be going through bit by bit. And so last week we recorded the entire first chapter over 2 consecutive days, and we've had a week to think about it. So what do you think after that week's break?
Music Room is still in my head. It will never leave my head. But it's funny because this experience, I'm just like, I just want to share it with people. And so I took a portion of the book and I started reading it to Taylor as he was folding laundry. And, at first he's like, why is he reading this thing at me? But after a while, I was like, he is like this beautiful savant with it. Because he's like, oh, without explaining anything, he was like, oh, this is about St. Patrick and the snakes. And I was like, excuse me, sir. How dare you decipher this? but I'm having fun with it, and it's almost like it's becoming like a Boy Scout badge in a way to be like, look what I'm doing, you know. Um, yeah,
Yes.
and I'm really enamored with the use of language, and I think I'm having fun with language for the first time in this way since since I discovered Poe, you know.
Right.
So that's where I'm at.
Good. And look, tell Taylor he is always welcome to come and do an episode. Taylor being TJ's fiance, who we love, and we would love to have Taylor in to bring that savant energy to the table. It's been interesting so far. We've had this is our third proper episode, fourth full episode, and it's just been TJ and I. But we are lining up the guests. We have guests coming up. I think pretty soon it's going to be rare to have a just TJ and Toby episode because people are interested in reading. It's kind of interesting. I think a lot of people are interested in that merit badge kind of having a crack at it, scaling, maybe not scaling the entire mountain, but having a go at one of the foothills and just sort of seeing what it sounds. Because when you hear it out loud, there's some really interesting things. And the last episode dropped this morning, dropped at midnight last night, and I got up this morning and I logged into the to Spotify, and we have listeners who hit the episode as soon as it dropped. I don't know who it is. I don't know who you are, who are subscribers who are immediately listening, but God bless you.
We appreciate you.
I got up and went, we have listens to to episode 2 already. That is amazing. And then, as I've already said, I go to the gym every morning, and I usually listen to music, and it's been one of those things. And this morning on the way over to the gym, I decided that I would listen to the episode entirely for quality control, not because I like to hear my own voice, but entirely quality control. And as you may also know, I always listen to podcasts on 1.75 speed.
Yes, you do.
I speedcast because who has time to listen to everything? So I listen to things fast so I can hear them all, which again, the purists, I'm sorry, purists. But not only am I reading the thing too fast when I get here, now I'm listening to it at 1.75 speed, and it is a trip. Listening to that episode. So I went to the gym this morning. On the way over to the gym, I played it in the car on the way over. And then I got there and I thought, let me just keep running it out. And so I got on the treadmill and listened to the entire episode, all of the end of chapter 1 on the treadmill. And remember I'd said that I kind of hate running and I'm always dreaming of when the running stops. And the way that I listen usually is I listen to music where I'll listen to like Australian alternative music is my thing. So I'll listen to Triple J, which is the Australian alternative radio station. I'll listen to that on my phone. And so I saw a track progress by how many songs I've heard. But take away that crutch, and I was listening to Joyce and listening to me butcher Joyce and listening to this going through. But it sent me into that kind of fugue state again that I get when I read, where the words washed over me and where I suddenly sort of noticed, oh, it's 10 minutes has gone past and my run doesn't hurt, and Joyce is coaxing me through. So I'm not necessarily endorsing listening to Wake on a treadmill while working out, run a half marathon and marathon our entire podcast. You can do all those kinds of things. But I ran 3.5 miles this morning listening to Joyce.
So you did a 5K listening to Joyce. Yeah.
And it's not, I ran out of episode before I finished my run because I was speedcasting 55 minutes. But it was a really interesting experience. I was kind of just going, let me listen to it in case there are some major mistakes that I forgot to edit out. I can giant swaths of silence or something. And there weren't any, but yeah, it was a really interesting process. But anyway, so I thought I'd bring that up because
I love that. I mean, when I've been doing morning walks / runs through the park recently, and I do the same thing with books on tape. I find that it's easier for me to get lost in the cardio if I'm doing that as opposed to music. If only I liked the sound of my own voice, I'd listen to the episode. But I
you have a beautiful voice, and I won't hear anyone say otherwise.
Well, thank you.
Of course. Okay, so speaking of beautiful voices, here's the segue. So we mentioned last episode we would have a musical guest this week to cover the Ballad of Percy Riley, which happens at the end of this chapter on page 44. But I heard some rehearsals of the Ballad of Percy O'Reilly this week, just sort of as our guest was preparing it, and I thought this is too good for me to stow at the end of a long read. So it's 15 pages into this chapter that we're reading, and I don't want to get 15 pages in and have all of our listeners bail because they're tired and it's too long, and then miss out on this experience. So what I'm going to do is Percy O'Reilly, the ballad, is going to be a separate episode all of its own, which means it's going to be probably a short episode because the entire ballad takes about 10 minutes to sing. But and so I want to make sure that that next week it gets its due, and so it sounds fantastic, and it's been in my head for days. And so getting a song that Joyce wrote stuck in your head is a new level of intensity when it comes to
yes, it is.
But next week we're going to have musician Meg Logue join us, and she's going to show it off, and then she's going to stick around after and talk to us about what she thinks of the Wake. Spoiler, not much. And that's mostly because she's an intelligent person who has better things to do with her life than to think about Joyce, but a genius in her own right musically. So, but that's next time, so we'll talk about that. In terms of notable elements, today we're going to read the first part of 1-2, which covers, as I've said, about 14 pages. Nothing really notable about the formatting. I think there's some font things going on as well. And we have another 100-character word coming up. Now, I've once again broken the rules of the podcast by doing some general light research. And I found that Joyce scholars have a name for these 100-letter words, and they call them thunderwords, which I love. I think thunderwords is fantastic.
It's like thunder blanket, but you know.
Yeah, very descriptive, gets you right there. I will also say that spell check accepts thunderword. Thunderword is fine, spell check. So we have some Joycean coders there saying yes. Let's accept thunderword into the dictionary. Although the word does not appear in the OED, I was getting ready to go in deep and go, oh, is it a real word? Let me see what it says in the OED to see if it's in there, but it's not. And so I erroneously suggested in episode 0 that there were 4 thunderwords in the book. We're coming up on our 3rd one now, so obviously that's wrong.
I started to wonder after the second one. I was like, this is super early to do this.
That's right. So there aren't 4, there are actually 10. 9 of them, and here's my favorite part. 9 of them are 100 characters long. 1 of them is 101 characters.
Of course it is.
And there's no way that's a mistake. That's Joyce being like, did you notice this extra T?
And we're like, no, Joyce, we didn't.
Yeah. So in the last one, I just wanted to throw back that that thunder word that we covered in the last episode is another portmanteau. You'll remember from the first episode, it was a portmanteau of lots of languages, a dozen different languages for their word for thunder. In the second thunder word, we have the word in Lithuanian, Breton, Persian, Turkish, Serbian, Malay, Romanian, Swahili, Arabic, Samoan, Albanian, and Finnish. So
this is why this book took so long, because he couldn't Google what
there's no Google.
He had to be like, I need to go find a book of these languages.
My Samoan and Albanian friends
and say thunder, spell it out. Thank you so much.
It's amazing. It's so good. So and it's really covering the swath of human existence. So because Swahili, Samoan, and Finnish, it's very hard to get much further away from one another. So today's episode, we get another thunder word, which appears right at the end of our reading, and it prefaces the song that we're going to hear in the next episode. And this is another interesting one because Joyce, not content with just using the words for thunder in these different languages, he puns on thunder by giving us multiple words that mean an audience clapping. So just like a thunderclap. And so this includes dialect words for clap or applause in languages like Russian, German, French, and Gaelic. And, big shout out to finnwake.com for the excellent notes that give us this. As I say, the research is not deep. I just know where to find it quickly. And the last thing I'll say, one thing I found, again, during my cursory research on the topic was one scholar suggests, and many people agree, is that the thunderwords are the only parts of the book where real life breaks in to the dreamer's consciousness. If we take the idea that everything that's happening in the wake is a dream, words for a dream, then this is the only time when real life breaks in, because as the dreamer sleeps, a thunderstorm is raging outside their house, and the big claps of thunder, the sound is breaking through into their dream. And so they're hearing it and it's being incorporated. Just like if you were setting a radio alarm, the first 15 minutes of the alarm playing,
just morph into
the words that are being spoken maybe are incorporated in the dream. So it's just fascinating. It's so interesting. So the idea that a thunderclap is being heard, ba-boom, 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 and it's being translated into the dreamer prefacing this song like an audience applauding for the song to begin. It's so fun. Okay, so yeah, lots of interesting stuff. As always, we're reading from the Penguin Modern Classics edition of Finnegans Wake, published in 2000 with a foreword by Seamus Dean. Today we'll be reading the first part of Chapter 1 and 2, which is a shorter read than last week at 14 pages, spanning pages 30 to 44 in this edition. This is a segment that is entitled The Humphreyad 1, an academic study about the rumour mill obsessed with HCE by the Oxford World's Classic edition of 2012, which also includes brief summaries of what's happening in each subsection, which we'll address at the end of the reading. So without further ado, Finnegans Wake. Now, to forbear for ever so little of iris trees and lily orangans, concerning the genesis of Harold or Humphrey Chimpton's occupational agnomen, we are back in the pre-surnames, pro-Domarith period, of course just when Enos chalked hole traps, and discarding once for all those theories from older sources which would link him back with such pivotal ancestors as the Glues, the Gravies, the Northeasts, the Anchors, and the Earwickers of Sidlesham in the 100 of manhood, or proclaim him offsprout of Vikings who had founded Wapentake and settled hem in Herrick or Eric, the best authenticated version, the Dumlat, read the reading of Hofed ben Edar, has it that it was this way. We are told how, in the beginning, it came to pass that, like cabbaging Cincinnatus, the grand old gardener was saving daylight under his redwood tree one sultry Sabbath afternoon, Hag Chivius Eve, in pre-fall paradise peace, by following his plough for rootles in the rear garden of Mob House, ye old marine hotel, when royalty was announced by Runner to have been pleased to have halted itself on the high road, along which a leisure-loving dog-fox had cast followed, also at walking pace, by a lady pack of cocker-spaniels. Forgetful of all save his vassal's plain fealty to the Ethnarch Humphrey or Harold stayed not to yoke or saddle, but stumbled out hot-faced as he was, his sweatful bandana loose from his pocket-coat, hasting to the forecourts of his public in tope, surcingle, solar scarf, and plaid, plus fours, puttees, and bulldog boots ruddled cinnabar with flagrant marl, jingling his turnpike keys and bearing aloft amid the fixed pikes of his hunting party a high perch atop of which a flower pot was fixed earthside hoist with care. On his majesty, who was, or often feigned to be, noticeably long-sighted from green youth, and had been meaning to inquire what, in effect, had caused yon causeway to be thus potholed, asking substitutionally to be put wise as to whether paternoster and silver doctors were not now more fancied bait for lobster trapping, honest blunt, harum Humphrey id, answered in no uncertain tones, very similarly with a fearless forehead. "No, ye maggers, I was just cotchin' on them bluggy earwuggers." Our sailor king, who was draining a guglet of obvious Adamale, gift both and Gorbin, upon this, ceasing to swallow, smiled most heartily beneath his walrus moustaches, and indulging that none too genial humour which William the Conk on the Spindle's side had inherited with a hereditary whitelock and some short-fingeredness from his great-aunt Sophie, turned towards two of his retinue of gallow-glasses, Michael, Etheling, Lord of Lakes and Offaly, and the Jubilee Mayor of Drogheda, Elcock, the two scatterguns being Michael M. Manning, proto-syndic of Waterford, and an Italian excellency called Jubilee, according to a later version cited by the learned scholarch Canavan of Can Make Noise. In either case, a typical religious family symbolizing puritas of doctrina, business per usuals, and the perky patch of Hamlock where the paddish pretties grow, and remarked dissolilly, holy bones of Saint Hubert, how our red brother of Puringrania would audibly fume did he know that we have for Sir Trusty Bailiwick a turnpiker who is by turns a pike bailer no seldomer than an earwigger. For he kins John Pill with his court so grey, and his haunts in his house in the morning. One still hears that pebble-crusted laughter, jappy-jap, cheerily, along among the roadside tree, the Lady Holmpatrick planted, and still one feels the emotive silence of the Gladstone beeling. I've moused out i' the burn. Comes the question, are these the facts of his nomen gentilization as recorded and accoladed in both or either of the collateral Andrew Paul Murphic narratives? Are those there fatter which we read in Sibylline between the far and the nafar? No, dung on the road. And shall no Homish be our place like? Yes, Mullaki our kingable Khan. We shall perhaps not so soon see. Pink ponks that bail for Sikhs Alicents where comes scepters with centaurs stray. Bear in mind, son of Hokmar, if so be you have Mitheg in your midness, this man is mountain, and unto changeth doth one ascend. Heave we aside the fallacy, as punicle as Finnegan, that it was not the king's self, but his inseparable sisters, uncontrollable night-talkers, Skiritsade with Donitsade, who afterwards, when the robbers shot up the social lights, came down into the world as amusers, and was staged by Madame Sudlow as Rosa, and Lily Muskingett in the pantomime, that the two pits Pathera-nosed, Melodiris and Galathy. The great fact emerges that after that historic date, all holographs so far exhumed initialed by Harumfried bear the sigla HCE. And while he was only and long and always good Duke Umfrey for the Hungaline spalpeens of Lucalizod and Chimbers to his cronies, it was equally certainly a pleasant turn of the populace which gave him a sense of those normative letters, the nickname, Here Comes Everybody. And imposing everybody, he always looked, constantly the same as and equal to himself, and magnificently well worthy of any and all such universalization. Every time he continually surveyed, amid vociferatings from in front of, accept these few nutties, and take off that white hat, relieved with, stop his grog, and put it in his log, and loots in his bass voco boots. From good start to happy finish, the truly Catholic assemblage gathered together in that King Street house of satin lustre-like, above floats and footlights, from their ass-bald velds and ox-gangs, unanimously to clapboard, the inspiration of his lifetime and the hits of their careers, Mr. Wallenstein Washington Semper Kelly's Immigreen Tourers in a command performance by special request with the courteous permission for pious purposes, the home-droned and enlivened performance of problem passion play of the Millantoury, running strong since creation, a royal divorce, then near the approach towards the summit of its climax, with ambitious interval band selections from the Bowgirl and the Lily, on all horsery show command nights from his vice-regal booth. His Barcelona is shillinged. There is a cuckoo's pit, less eminent than the red ritual hoods of Macabre and Cullen, where a veritable Napoleon the Nth, our world stage practical joke piece, and retired Celtic commandant in his own wise, this folk's forefather all of the time sat having the entirety of his house about him, with the invariable broad-stretched kerchief, cooling his whole neck, nape and shoulder blades, and in a wardrobe-panelled tuxedo completely thrown back from a shirt well entitled a swallow-all, on every point far out-starching the laundered claw-hammers and marble-topped highboys of the pit stalls and early amphitheatre. The piece was this. Look at the lamps. The cast was thus. See under the clock. Ladies' circle. Cloaks may be left. Pit, promer, and parterre. Standing room only. Habituals conspicuously emergent. A baser meaning has been read into these characters, the literal sense of which decency can safely scarce hint. It has been blurtingly bruited by certain wisecrackers, the stinks of Mahorat are in the night plots of the morning, that he suffered from a vile disease. Asthma, unmanner them. To such a suggestion, the one self-respecting answer is to affirm that there are certain statements which ought not to be, and one should like to hope to be able to add, ought not to be allowed to made. Nor have his detractors, who an imperfectly warm-blooded race, apparently conceive him as a great white caterpillar capable of any and every enormity in the calendar, recorded to the discredit of the Duke and Kellikeck families, mended their case by insinuating that, alternately, he lay at one time under the ludicrous imputation of annoying Welsh fusiliers in the People's Park. Hey, hey, hey! Hawk, hawk, hawk! Fawn and Flora on the lee loved that little old jock. To anyone who knew and loved the Christ-likeness of the big, clean-minded giant H.C. Earwicker throughout his excellency long vice-frugal existence, the mere suggestion of him as a lust-sleuth nosing for trouble in the booby-trap rings particularly preposterous. Truth, beard on, prophet, compels one to add that there is said to have been quondam, fute, some case of the kind implicating, it is interdum believed, a quiddam, if he did not believe exist, it would be necessary quoniam to invent him. About that time, stambuling around dumbailing in leaky sneakers with his Turk record, who had remained tophacantically anonymous, but, let us hew him Abdullah Gamelexarchy, was, it is stated, posted at Malone's at the insistence of watch warriors of the Vigilance Committee, and years afterwards cries one even greater, Ibid, a commender of the frightful, seemingly unto such as were sulhan sated, tropped head, fiat, waiting his first of the month Frood's turn for that chop-pa cabax alicubi on the old house for the charge hard, roke haddocks off Hawkins Street. Lo, you blondie liar, Gob seen you in the narked place, and she what's eateth our home defileth these boils. There's a cabful of bash indeed in the Homer of that meal. Slander, let it lie its flattest, has never been able to convict our good and great and no ordinary Southron earwalker, that homogeneous man, as pious author called him, of any graver impropriety than that, advanced by some woodwards of regarders who did not dare deny, the showmers, that they had chin-ted, chin-tam, chin-taffed, that day consumed their soul of the corn, or of having behaved with ungentlemanski immodious opposite a pair of dainty maidservants in the swooth of the rushy hollow whither, or so the two gown and pinners pleaded, Dame Nature in all innocency had spontaneously and about the same hour of the eventide sent them both, but whose published combinations of silken lane testimonies are, were not dubiously pure, visibly divergent as wept on minor points touching the intimate nature of this, a first offence in vert or venison, which was admittedly an incautious, but at its wildest, and partial exposure, with such attenuating circumstances, Garthin, Gaddeth, Green, Where, Soakman, Brighteth, Girling, as an abnormal St. Swithin's summer, and Jesse's Rosa Sharon, a ripe occasion to provoke it. We can't do without them. Wives, rush to the restures. Off man will toman while led is the lull. Zesids arcadon, vidopleach, volapluck, fiskup for flesh Nelly, el mundo nov zolflen. If she's a Lilith, pull early. Pauline, allow. And mailers are bushed, keep back, guiltless as much laid to him as he was clearly for once at least, he clearly expressed himself as being with still a trace of his erstwhile burr, and hence it has been received of us that it is true. They tell the story, as amalgamas absorbing of calcium corallides and hydrophobes sponges could make it, how one happy-go-gusty Ides of April morning, the anniversary as it fell out of his first assumption of his mirthday suit and rights in appurtenance or to the confusioning of human races, ages and ages after the alleged misdemeanor when the tried friend of all creation, Tigerwood Roadstaff to his stay, was billowing across the wide expanse of our greatest park in his catechit kepi and great belt and Haydn sacks and his Blaufunks fustian and Ironsides jackboots and Bagavat gaiters and his rubberized Inverness, he met a cad with a pipe. The latter, the luciferant, not the orluluate, who the odds are is still berting dagabout in the same straw beamer, carrying his overgoat under his shoulder, sheepside out so as to look more like a country gentleman and signing the pledge as gaily as you please, heartily accosted him with Guinness Thor Tool in G mid-dinner Phil. A nice how do you do in pool black at the time of some of our old days may still tremblingly recall, to ask could he tell him how much o'clock it was that the clock struck, had he any idea by cock's luck as his watch was Brady's. Hesitancy was clearly to be evitated, execration as cleverly to be homisoid. The earwicker of that spurring instant, realizing on fundamental liberal principles the supreme importance, nexally and noxally, of physical life, the nearest help relay being Ping Ping K.O. St. Patrick's Day and the Fenian Rising, as wishful as he felt of being hurled into eternity right then, plugged by a soft-nosed bullet from the sap, halted quick of the draw, and replying he was feeling tipstaff cue produced from his gun pocket by Jurgenson's shrapnel Waterbury, ours by communism, his by use of capture, but on the same stroke hearing above the skirling of harsh Mother East, old Fox Goodman, the bellmaster, over the wastes to south, at work upon the 10-ton tonuant thunderous tenor toller in the speckled church, Cohunan's call, told the inquiring kidder, by Jehovah, it was 12 of 'em sideral, and tankard time, adding but all, as he bended deeply with smoked sardinish breath, to give more ponders to the copper stick he presented, though this seems in some confusion with the chap-stuck ginger, which, as being of sours, acids, salts, sweets, and bitters compounded, we know him to have used as chaw for bone, muscle, blood, flesh, and vim vital. That whereas the accusation against them had been made, what was known in high quarters as was stated in Morgan's Post, by a creature in human form, who was quite beneath par and several degrees lower than your triple hydrad snake. In greater support of his word, it, quaint anticipation of a famous phrase, has been reconstructed out of an oral style into the verbal for all time with ritual rhythmics. In quiritary quietude, and two salmon stucked from successive accounts by Noah Webster in the redaction known as Sayings Attributive of H.C. Earwicker, prize on shillings, post lots free, the flaxen Gygas tapped his chronometrum drum, and now standing full erect above the adjacent floodplain, scene of its happening with one Berlin gauntlet chop-stuck in the huff of his elbow, by ancientest signor, his gesture meaning pointed at an angle of 32 degrees towards his Duke de Furs overgrown milestone, as fellow to the gauge, and after a rendy present pause, averred with solemn emotions fire. Shish shake comrade, me only them 5 ones, he is equal combat. I have once 5 straight, hence my no nation-wide hotel and creamery establishments, which for the honours of our mutual daughters, credit me, I am willing to take my stand, sir, upon the monument, that sign of our ruru redemption, by any hygienic day to this hour, and to make my oath to my sin-finners, even if I get life for it, upon the open Bible, and before the great taskmasters, I lift my hat, and in the presence of the deity itself, and well of Bishop and Mrs. Mycan of High Church of England, as of all such have said my immediate with-dwellers, and of every living soul in every corner wheresoever of this globe in general, which useth of my British to my backbone tongue and commutative justice, that there is not one tittle of truth, allow me to tell you, in that purest of fib fabrications. Gaping Jill, swift to mate Erithors, stern to check self, diagnosing through useless tube that it was to make with a markedly post-puberal hyperchiturity pipe of Heidelberg man-like cavern ethics, lufted his sloping forward, bad sweatigore, good march, and Dublin notch onto it as he was greedily obliged, and like a sensible ham, with infinite tact in the delicate situation, seen the touchy nature of its perilous theme, thanked them for guilders received and time of day. Not a little token of Bock all the same, that was owl the god's clock it was, and upon humble duty to greet his tisk minister, and he shall gild the gaper, and thee his a mouldy voids, went about his business, whoever it was, saluting corpses, as a matter of course. One could hound him out, had one heart for the monticules of scalp and dandruff dropping blaze his trail, accompanied by his trusty snorler and his permanent reflection Verbig Gracis. I have met with you, bird, too late, or if not, too worm and early, and with tag for ildiot, for in his second month language, as many of the big-timers' verbatim words, which he could balbly call to memory that same Cavelde, ere the hour of the twattering of bards in the twitter-lutter between Druidia and the deep sleep sea, when suppertide and souvenir to charlatan mall, jointly came gently, and upon the quiet darkenings of grand and royal flitman fush, and kept it hedge, whereas to many a soft-tongue's porky talk, mewed unser sufter pogio, arvanda always acquiescent. While studying castells in the Blaun and studying cowshots over the Norren, he spat in careful convertedness a mosaic dispensation about his hearthstone, if you please. Irish saliva, mosh du hole, but would a respectable, prominently connected fellow of Iro-European ascendances, with well-dressed ideas, who knew the correct things, such as Mr. Shall we sigh or Mr. Shall we laugh, expectorate after the callous fashion. No thank yous. When he had his belcher spuckatuck in his pocket, pathuck, Muse fed with his thockets, after having supped of the dish sot and potage, which he snobbishly dabbed peach Bombay at his rawly own Lucan Pukin Pilsen pie, which she knows when sinaft and pimbed him. A supreme of excelling peas, balled under a minshog mill into white malt wine's hour, a proviant a little bilker hoarsely relished, shaffet in the sneeval season, being as fain on as you rat with fennel, and on this celebrating occasion of the happy escape for a crowning of pot valiance, this regional platter, Benjamin of Buelis, with a splolish olive to middle point its zenith, was marrying itself, poco grasso, busked very deluxiously with a bottle of Finis, Bruer 98, followed for second nuptials by a Pierce Porter, Grand Cur, of both of which cherished table lights, though humble the banquet till the Lehman's farewell, he obdurately sniffed the cobweb-crusted corpse. Our cad's bit of strife, nee Berenice Maxwelton, with a quick ear for spittoons, as the after-tale hath it, gland up as usual with domestic husbandry. No persix and armorlands for thee, Pomeranzia. But slipping the clave in her claw, broke of the matter among 111 others in her usual curtsy. How faint these first Vespers women that are, a secret piglandio, a mud the laverdy den of their manfolker. The next night nudge one as was Hegespius over a hoppachi, her eyes dry and small and speech thicklish because he appeared a funny colour like he couldn't stood they old hens no longer, to her particular reverend, the director, whom she had been meaning in her mind primarily to speak with. Hosh! Intra, just a timblespoon, trusting between coupled lips and Annie Laurie promises, may she never Enniskerry puddin come Hunniskov for the pecklish peskins, that the gospel so delivered in their epistolaire, buried tears totally in their Irish stew, would go no further than his Jesuit's cloth. Yet in Vinars Venitas, volatiles valetotum, It was this overspoiled priest, Mr. Brown, disguised as a Vincentian, who, when seized of the facts, was overheard in his secondary personality as a Nolan and under-eared pool soul by accident, if, that is, the incident it was an accident. For here, the ruler of Ecclesiastes of Hippo outpuffs the writress of Havaban Anna to pianissimi, a slightly varied version of Crooked Ribs Confidentials. What Mayor Alois said, but for Josephine's sake. Hands been hands, in fealty sworn, my bravo breast, my flower, and to the strains of The Secret of Her Birth, hushly pierced the Rubian Aurelium of one Philly Thurston, a lay teacher of rural science and phonetics of a near stout figure and about the middle of his 40s, during a priestly flutter for safe and sane bets at the hippic run fields of breezy Baldoyle on a date. WW goes through the card. Easily capable of remembrance by all pickers-up of events national and Dublin details, the doubles of Perkin and Porlock, Peer and Prole, when the classic Encourage Hackney plate was captured by two noses in a stablecloth, finish ek and neck, some and none, Evilo Nevilo, from the cream colt bold boy Cromwell, after a clever getaway by Captain Chaplain Blunt's Row, Hinny St. Dalla, drummer coxswain non-depict third, at breakneck odds, thanks to you great little bonny, little porty, little Winnie Widger, you're all their nappies, who in his never-rip mud and purpular cap was surely leagues unlike any other phantom weight that ever topped our timber Maggies. Was two Pisonomes, Tidden Covies, the wetter is pest, the wrens are overt and come, and the vokes of the turfer is hurled on our land, of the name of Treacle Tom, as was just out of pop, following the theft of a leg of Kehoe, Donnelly, and Pakenham's finished pork, and his own blood and milk brother, Frisky Shorty. He was, to be exquisitely pumptilious about them, both Shorty and Frisky. A tipster, come off the hulks, both of them awfully poor. What was out on the bum around for an oof-bird game, for a Jimmy a Goblin, or a small thick-un as chanced, while the Seaforths was making the colleen ball, to ear the passion in the motor clobber make use of his law language. Edzo on! Touching the case of Mr. Adams, what was in all the Sundays about it, which he has rubbing noses with, and having a gurgle off his own along of the butty bloke in the specs. This Treacle Tom, to whom reference has been made, had been absent from his usual wild and woolly haunts in the land of counties capellines for some time previous to that. He was, in fact, in the habit of frequenting common lodging-houses where he slept in a nude state, hail fellow with meth, in strange men's cots. But race night blotto after divers tots of hellfire, red biddy, bulldog, blue ruin, and creeping Jenny, Eglandine's choicest herbage, supplied by the duck and doggies, the galloping primrose, Bridget Brewsters, the cock, the postboy's horn, the little old men's and all swell that aim swell, the cup and the stirrup, he sought his well-warmed Liebelob in a housing room abide with one other at block WW. Why did he back it? Why didn't he back it? Pump court, the liberties, and what with Maltapuke on Voltapuke, resnored a hacaho, a caherily, to the burden of I come, my horse delayed, nom, the substance of the tale of the evangelical busybody, Bussy, and the Russner Nabeen, the girls he would keep calling them for the collarette and skirt, the sunbonnet and carnation. In parts, it seemed he was before the iots of martyrs, or other whales the thirds of fossil years, he having Beham with Catcher when Lavinius had her men's lease to sea in a pump ship of doodly show, whereas he was looking for fight with the willed Rorses. Oft in the chilly night, the meganistic, the epic Thalamarus, using easy slumber in their hearings of a small and stony-broke cash draper's executive, Peter Cloran discharged, O'Mara, an ex-private secretary of no fixed abode, locally known as Mildew Lisa, who had passed several nights, funnish enough, in a doorway under the blankets of homelessness, in on the bunk of Iceland, pillowed upon the stone of destiny colder than a man's knee or woman's breast, and Hosty, no slouch of a name, an all-starred beach busker who, sans rooty and sans scrapey, suspicioning as how he was setting on a tooled stool on the verge of self-abyss, most starved with melancholia over everything in general. Knight Berman, you served him with Natagal's Nano, had been towhead tossing on the shakedown, devising ways and manners of means of what he loved to infidelis somehow or other in the nation, getting a hold of some chap's parabellum in the hope of taking a wing sociable and lighting upon a side-wheel dive somewhere off the dull key down Larry and bleak rookie Trameline, where he could throw true and go and blow the Sibishaddle Napper off himself for 2 bits to Boldywell Boltitude in the peace and quitibus of one sure shot bottle. He, after having been trying all he knew, with the ladies' help of Madam Gristle, for upwards of 18 calendars to get out of Sir Patrick Dunn's, through Sir Humphrey Jervis's, and into the St. Kevin's bed in the Adelaide's hospitals, from these incurable Welleslays among their uncarable Wellesdays, through St. Iago, by his cockle hat, good laser, deliver us, without after having been able to jerry-wrangle at any sides. Lisa O'Davis and Roche Mongan, who had so much in common, epicactidally, if the phrase be permitted hostis a odor in super petro perfractus, as an understood thing, slept their sleep of the swimborn in the one sweet undulant mother of tumbler bunks with hosty, just how the shavers in the shore, the yokels in the yotes, or, well, the wasters in the wild, and the bustling twinny-dawn of all works, mead of anthems where here we pant, had not been many jiffies furbishing potlids, door brasses, scholars' apple cheeks, and link boys' metals, when ash hopper minded like no fella, he go make bacon beg fuss long a white man, the rejuvenated busker, for after a good night's rave and rumble and a shuncam's top morning with his coexes, he was not the same man, and his broad-awake bedroom suite, our boys, as our Byron called them, were up and a shuffle from the hog's home they loved named the Barrel, cross Eben's chilled hamlet, thry roots and restings on there, then superficies curiously correspondent with those Lanaya and Puncta, where our Tubany, Habany, Metro, Maniplums, below the Oberflake under rails, and stations at this time of writing, to the thrummings of a cruth fiddle, which cremoning and crenorning, levy-grevy, witty and wavy, appy, leppy, and playable, caressed the ears of the subjects of King St. Finity the Festive, who in brick homes of their own and in their flavoury berry beds, heeding hardly cry of honeyman, sowed lavender of foinboin salmon alive, with their priggish mouths all open for the larger appreciation of this long-awaited messiah of roratorios, were only half past a stweep, and after a brisk pause at a pawnbroking establishment for the pathetic purpose of redeeming the songster's truly admirable false teeth, and a prolonged visit to a house of call at Cujas Place, Fizz, the old sot's hole, in the parish of St. Cecily, within the liberty of Creelmore, not 1,001 national leagues, that was, by Griffith's valuation, from the site of the statue of prime-era Glasstone, setting a match to the march of a maker, at the last of the stewards Pute Etre, where their tail rambles along, the trio of whack-fault the diddlers was joined by a further intentions, apply, tomorrow casual, and a decent sort of the had-been variety, who had just been touching the weekly insult, for wit and all fig blabbers, who saith of noun, had stimulants in the shape of G and G's, stood by the damn decent sort, after which stag luncheon, and a few ones more just to celebrate yesterday, flushed with their fire-stuff-forted friendship. The rascals came out of the licensed premises, Brown's first, the small PS executive cap a hand in their sad rear like a pate lady's postscript. I want money. Please send. wiping their laugh-leaking lips on their sleeves, how the Bukalines shout their Roscans generally, Shen Fion's Araron, and the rhymer's world was with reason the richer for a would-be ballad, to the ballader of which world of humanity singing owes a tribute for having placed on the planet's melomap his lay of the vilest bogier, but most attractionable avatar the world has ever had to explain for. This more correctly Lubine or fellow, me, Lida, was first poured forth where Rio Livio riots and cold Ahodo humps under the shadow of the monument of the should-have-been legislator. Eleuthodendron, spare, woodman, spare, to an overflow meeting of all the nations in Leinster, fully filling the visional area, and as a single-minded supercrowd, easily representative, what with masks, wet with faces, of all sections and cross-sections, wine shop and cocoa house poured out to brim up the broaching, of our Liffey-side people, to omit the mention of the mainland minority, and such as had wayfared via Watling, Erning, Icknild, and Stane, in chief a halted Cockney car, with its quotal of Hardmouth's hacks, a northern Tory, a southern Whig, an East Anglian chronicler, and a Land-Wester Guardian, ranging from slips of young Dublinos from Cutpurse Row, having nothing better to do than to walk about with their hands in their knee pants, sucking air-whackers, weed dullichet, jumbo bricks, side by side with truant officers, 3 wooden bowls and poplin in search of a crust of porn to busy professional gentlemen, a brace of palesmen with run dairies, nooning towards dailies, fresh from snipe hitting and mallard missing on Rutland Heath, exchanging cold sneers, mass going ladies from Holmes Street in their chairs, the bearers baited, some wandering hammerlags out of the adjacent clover fields of Moss Gardens, an oblate father from Skinner's Alley, bricklayers, a Fleming in tabernet fumant with spouse and dog, an aged hammersmith who had some chisellers by the hand, a bout of cudgel players, not a few sheep from with the braxy, 2 blue-coat scholars, 4 broke gents out of Simpson's on the Rocks, a portly and a pert still tassing turkey coffee, an orange shrub in Tick-Eye's door, Peter Pym and Paul Fry, and then Elliot and, Atkinson, suffering hell's delights from the blains of their annuitants' acorns, not forgetting a deuce of Diana's ridey for the hunt, a particularist beprenderity pondering on the Roman Easter, the tonsure question and Greek uniates, plunkum a lace lappet head, or 2 or 3 or 4 from a window, and so on down to a few good old souls, who as they were juiced after taking their pledge over at the uncle's place, were evidently under a spell of liquor. From the wake of Tarry the tailor, a fair girl, a jolly poster boy thinking off 3 flagons in one, a plumo droll, a half-sir from the weaver's almshouse, who clings and chat clings to her, a whole damn's cloud-hued petticoat, as child, as curio later, as Keok O'Leary. The war arrow went round, so it did, the nation wants a gaze, and the ballad in the Fenebrine Trancope meter, affectioned by Tayo Sibo in his Casudas di Pulinicello Artahut, stamp-stamped onto a slip of Blanco Vide, and headed by an excessively rough and red woodcut, privately printed at the rhyme press of Delville, soon fluttered its secret on white highway and brown byway to the rose of the winds and the blue of the gales, from archway to lattice and from black hand to pink ear, village crying to village, through the 5 pussy-fours green of the United States of Scotia Picta, and he who denies it, may his hairs be rubbed in dirt. To the added strain, so peacefold, of his majesty the flute, that one-croon king of inscruments, Pigot's purest cielo al cielo, which Mr. Delacy? Horn anticipated, a perfect downpour of plaudits among the rhapsods, piped out of his decent sort hat, looking still more like his Percival namesake, as men of Gaul noted, but before of to sput about. The snowy-crested curl, a moist the leader's wild and molting hair, Ductor Hitchcock hoisted his fizzy fuzz at bludgeon's height, signum to his companions of the chalice of the Lord for the Lord, loud fellow, boys and silentium in curia. our maypole once more where he rose of old. And the canto was chanted there, chorused and christened where by the old tollgate, St. Anna's church, street and church. And around the lawn the ran it ran, and this is the ran that Hosty made, spoken. Boyles and Cahills, Skerritts and Pritchards, versified and persified may the truth we tale of live in Stony. Here line the refrains of some vote him Vike, some mote him Mike, some dub him Lin and Finn, while others hail him Lug, Bug, Dan, Lop, Lex, Lax, Gun, or Gwyn. Some apt him Arth, some bapt him Barth, Col, Null, Sol, Will, Wheel, Wall, but I parse him Perso Riley, else he's called no name at all together. Arrah, leave it to Hosty, Frosty Hosty, leave it to Hosty, for he's the man to rhyme the ran, the ran, the ran, the king of all rans. Have you here? Some ha. Have we where? Some ha'n't. Have you heard? Others do. Have we whered? Others don't. It's coming. It's brumming. The clip, the clop, all cla, glass crash, the click, 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 classic, click, clopads, click, clutch, clabata, crepri, croppy, gradang, sammy, nui, at a proprietary, apple daddy, consider, pink, cut. Okay, there we have chapter 1, 2, at least the first bit, from Finnegans Wake. TJ, what do you think?
This was extremely interesting, and I've been going through and I've been putting little brackets around phrases and things that I've kept away. Like, I have met with you, bird, too late, or if not, too warm and early. I was like, that's just a nice turn of phrase. But the thing that keeps coming back to me is that there are sections of the language that just force you into, a dialect, and the skill of being able to capture actual people's voice and rhythm in the syntax, I think is really kind of fascinating. And it got me wondering about how much of this is just inside jokes that we will never get because of the evolution of language.
For sure. Yeah.
And also like the legacy of his writing. I feel like a lot of contemporary novels now are writing about a social issue in such a way that we could look back on it 40 years from now and be like, this is how people felt about insert issue here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where this feels like it's like inside jokes for the people who are actually inside, and inside jokes for Joyce. It was like he's having fun with the words himself. And I just and I just like some of the ways that he has these tangents that kind of explain outside of the facts of a person or a situation. He'll state the fact. He'll state the person and the thing that's happening. He'll be like, but actually on the side, this is actually what's happening. So just so you know. And so I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I found that it more came in and out for me in terms of meaning than in previous chapters. And maybe it's just because I'm getting used to his style. This felt like a less obtuse chapter than the previous one. I feel as though there's a lot in there. I mean, maybe the first chapter is the test to weed out the ones that aren't the real ones, and then you get into this one, which is interesting about the rumors and about the way people are talking. And I find it really interesting if we talk about it in the context of dream state. We do have moments of lucidity that show up where it's kind of, you go, oh, I see. It's like, to go back to the thunderstorm analogy, it's like reading a book in a thunderstorm, and every now and then something is illuminated, and then everything else is in the dark. And if you're in sort of this lucid dreaming idea where there's a lot that doesn't make sense, but the things that do make sense you can grab onto and sort of use those as little footholds to make your way through. And so, there was a lot of really interesting things in here, lots of really interesting turns of phrase as well, including, as we discussed in the break, one word that I didn't say.
Yeah, which... a very derogatory term for black people was just slipped in here, and we were both like, "Oh, we saw it." And
And I guess as it rushed towards you, you were like, "What's Toby going to do? Is he
no,
going to?"
I knew what you were gonna do. Like, it's part of why we're friends. But I was also like, hmm, you know.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it speaks of the time.
It well, sure, yeah. It's and so it doesn't really make it better. You can't. I think there would be an argument some would make to say you got to read it because it was part of the time. And this is on page 40 if anyone's interested in seeing the word in all of its in unglory. But I just paused and just skipped over the word. I didn't. I also didn't want to draw attention to it by giving it another name or giving it sort of the sanitized version that we hear in media now, which just makes it almost worse. So,
Yeah, because it makes you say the word in your head.
yeah. Little relics in there that because of the time across the world, the word was just part of the vernacular. It wasn't until much more recently that people started going, wait, we shouldn't really be saying these things. So yeah, lots of interesting turns of phrase. I thought on page 41, he refers to the place where people go when they're alcoholics.
Yeah.
At St. Cecily, he calls it the old sot's hole, which is maybe the greatest description of a halfway house for alcoholics in the time. That's it. You're sentenced to spend time in the old sot's hole.
I'm obsessed with Treadmill Tom, who is like, he's getting around, you know. I was like, Tom, you you scallywag, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
This, yeah.
also, I'm obsessed with the phrase. I think I'm most obsessed with from this section is, "Are maypoles once more where heroes of old?" I was like,
Mm-hmm.
that's just it feels like an indie rock song lyric, you know, um, where someone, you know, at 17 is like, "Oh, that's so deep," but like, but I also think it's just actually a beautiful turn of phrase. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I realize listening back to recordings of this that I say the word absolutely too much, but I feel strongly about your statements. I think there's really interesting things that come out of these kinds of things, and nearly every time you bring up an example of something that stood out to you, it's something that I've zipped past that I haven't even clocked. So it's a really interesting experience to read it with you because we're both finding different things and things that are jumping out to us. I loved reading on page 39. I loved reading the section. He gets into a lot of alliterative stuff, but there were certain sections that were just fun to read, really
mhm.
fun to read. When he says the doubles of Perkin and Pollock, Peer and Proll, when the classic Uncouraged Hackney plate was captured by two nose in a stablecloth finish, Eck and Neck, some and none, Evilo, Navilo from the cream colt, bold boy Cromwell. After going on through that, I don't want to labor it, but just it's so plosive and so distinct, particularly also then the section right before the name. What name will we give to
Oh, that
HCE?
was fun.
So good. Some dub him this and some dub him that, but we will call him Perso Riley.
Or else he's called no name at all. Like,
Yes.
you know, that's Shakespearean. It's like,
Yep.
you know,
Yeah, and it's so nice when this is the real benefit to a cold read because I wasn't waiting for that to come up. I wasn't looking forward to, oh, here I'm going to have a bit that is going to be a little bit more decisive.
mhm.
But it comes and it hits you, and if you let it sweep you away, and I feel as though the reading's getting easier, partially because I'm getting more used to, as I said, I'm getting more used to the style. I'm getting my legs under me to do it. But yeah, bringing in that texture, bringing in that color is really gratifying. As opposed to reading it quietly to yourself, you don't get that. Whereas I
Yeah.
felt really strongly about that momentum that came.
Yeah,
Uh,
it is really nice. And I agree, like, it is getting easier for me to decipher what's happening as I'm listening. At one I wrote down, I was like, this reminds me of whenever I pick up any sort of new sci-fi novel or anything like that. The
mhm.
first two chapters, I'm just like, okay, I'm being noun verb to death until they have, until they have a meaning, and then I can read the book again. But it does instill a new fear that in those same books, if I walk away from them for 6 months, I go back to them and I'm like, what?
What? Yeah. That's why I've never been able to read Dune.
Yeah,
Maybe
because you're like, what?
I get a hand in my man card. Apparently, that's a lot of people's favorite book, but I just couldn't.
Well, you and I both, we could just slide it across the
Yeah.
table because
That's
take
not
it
for
if
me.
that's the case.
Yeah, because Dune doesn't have phrases like, I mean, referring to on page 42, fresh from snipe hitting and mallard missing on
Yeah,
Rutland Heath. Like, just, it's so descriptive. It's so clear that, what he's been doing. He's been out shooting birds. He's been hitting snipes and missing mallards.
it's great.
It's wonderful. So we do have the breakdowns here from Oxford World's Classic. As I said, the title is The Humphreyad One, an academic study about the rumour mill obsessed with HCE. So the breakdown here from top of page 30 to 3313, we hear about the history, the Earwicker's naming by King William and his nicknaming by the people of Here Comes Everybody.
Which I love.
It's so good. Absolutely. Yeah, it's really distinctive there. And then 3314 to 3429, a rumour qualified. 3430 to 38.8, HCE's encounter with a cad. He gratuitously swears his innocence. The cad, amused if baffled, goes home. So that confrontation was one of the moments that stood out. I was going, oh, I see where we're at now. I can see this interaction. And then the next section, which we didn't finish because we haven't heard the ballad yet, but we will hear it next episode. Gossip passes from the cad's wife to a priest, to a lay teacher, to a tipster with apnea, to 3 down and outs, who, treated to many drinks, compose and sing the slanderous ballad of Perce O'Reilly, or aka HCE, to working class Dublin. So we see this rumour mill that the cad has said there's
That
something
lands
and
in a song.
Passed down as a game of telephone
until
HCE is slandered.
These 3 are just creating a diss track for AC.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's Kendrick and Drake invented nothing.
No. Yeah, this has just been. It's so much fun. It's so much fun. I don't know. I like a little sauce, right? So I'm still tripping over our good old friend Tom. I'm just like Tom, stay home.
They're keeping us on our toes, and so many interesting things. Bridget gets a mention. My daughter's name is Bridget, and I'm hoping that we'll see my son show up. I think actually there was a Cormac earlier, so both my kids have shown up. But that's what happens when you give your kids Irish names.
Ecclesiastes of Hippo.
We also had the backward E on page 36.
Yeah, which I thought that your interpretation of that was fantastic.
I tried to do an E backwards. No memory of what it was, but yes, it is a capital E in a slightly larger font and then written backwards. So which becomes not an E anymore, obviously, but probably is another way of pronouncing it in a different tongue. But we do what we can,
and you do great.
Thank you, I appreciate it, and I couldn't do it without you.
You could have just been more boring.
Well, we'll see how that goes in the future. There will be days when I'm without you, and I will probably just spend all my time talking about what would happen if TJ were here. But
a comfrey gentleman. I'm just like the word comfrey. I'm like, yeah, that's how someone would probably say it.
Yeah. It's interesting. It reminds me a lot of Train Spotting. I don't know if you've read Train Spotting.
Oh yeah.
But which Train Spotting has always been one of my favorite books because it's written in dialect.
Mm-hmm.
And you spend the first, like you said, almost like the science fiction example, you spend the first 3 or 4 pages of Train Spotting going, I have no idea what anyone is saying. And by a chapter in,
you're like, okay,
it's off to the races. But Irvin Welsh does not hold our hands. He just is like, this is how we talk in Edinburgh. Deal with it. Yeah. So being forced into dialect, if you're reading something and something's written out phonetically, and then you start saying it, and you're like, oh, I'm putting on an Irish accent, like I promised I wouldn't, but
but you can't help.
Joyce wants you to, so
yeah, I think it's great. Playwrights, take note.
Anyway. Yeah, more dialect plays.
It's almost as if you can do that, you know?
Yeah.
But
Okay. Well, look, this is turning into a long one because we've had a lot to talk about, and we're trying to keep these short.
and we enjoy each
short.
other, so get
And
off our backs.
we do. So I'm not going to apologize. If anyone's listening this long, then clearly you're a fan. So the more of us you can get, the better. So that's fine. But that is all the time we have today for Wake. If the statistics are to be believed, people are out there listening, which I still don't understand. But also, we've seen from the statistics that many of them are bailing within 10 minutes, and I do understand that. So,
isn't that the double-edged sword of having those analytics? You're like, and
yeah.
this is when they stop.
Yeah, but I take comfort in the fact that they're listening to us banter at the beginning, and then as soon as the joy starts, they're like, "Nope." so they come for the chat, and they leave when it starts getting a little bit too much. So yes, so thank you for listening. I've been Toby Malone, and I'm joined by TJ Young. We are well on our way making this happen. Join us next week for the rest of Chapter 1-2, entirely focused on the Ballad of Percy O'Reilly. See you there, music lovers and lyric likers. This has been Wake, a cold reading of James Joyce's Finnegans Wake, just to hear it out loud. If you've made it this far, thank you for your dedication. Join us next week for another segment of Finnegans Wake and a chat about what we've found. Wake is a Moon Street Media podcast, engineered by TJ Young and Toby Malone. Our theme song is The Ballad of Percy O'Reilly, arranged and performed by Meg Logue after James Joyce. Wake is recorded in Canada, where Finnegans Wake is in the public domain. For community and bonus content, join us at our free Patreon at patreon.com/wakepod. If you have questions about Finnegans Wake, don't ask us. We're just as confused as you are. See you next week.